Hello history lovers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're re-diving deep into one of history's most dramatic and debated stories, the fall of Anne Boleyn. We all know the official narrative, a queen executed for treason, adultery, and even incest. But was she truly guilty, or was she the victim of a meticulously crafted conspiracy? Let us peel back the layers of the Tudor court and ask the big question: who really killed Anne Boleyn? To understand her fall, we must first understand her rise. Anne wasn't just another pretty face at court. She was intelligent, ambitious, and had a sharp political mind, shaped by her time in the sophisticated courts of Europe. When King Henry VIII fell for her, he didn't just want a mistress, he wanted a new queen. But Anne refused to be a passing fancy. She held out for marriage, a move that would ultimately change the course of English history. Henry's obsession with her, and his desperate need for a male heir, led him to break with the Catholic Church, divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and declare himself the supreme head of the Church of England. In 1533, Anne finally got her crown. She was Queen of England. But the crown is heavier than it looks, and the path to wearing it had made her powerful enemies. From the very beginning, Anne's position was precarious. A large portion of the English population, and indeed much of Europe, still viewed Catherine of Aragon as the one true queen and her daughter, Mary, as the rightful heir. Anne was often publicly insulted, called a witch and a usurper. Her biggest failure, in the eyes of the king and the kingdom, was her inability to produce a male heir. She gave Henry a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I, but a series of subsequent miscarriages, culminating in the loss of a son in January 1536, sealed her fate. Henry's patience had run out. His love, once a raging fire, had turned to ash. The king was starting to believe his marriage was cursed, and his eye was already wandering to a new lady-in-waiting, Jane Seymour. Anne was no longer the solution to his problems. She had become the problem itself. This is where the conspiracy theories begin, and our first major suspect enters the scene: Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell was Henry's chief minister, a brilliant and ruthless political operator who had been instrumental in both the break with Rome and Anne's rise to power. For a time, they were allies, united in their goals for religious reform. But their alliance soured. They clashed over foreign policy and, more importantly, over what to do with the vast wealth seized from the monasteries. Anne wanted the money used for charitable and educational purposes. Cromwell saw it as a way to fill the king's empty coffers and secure his own power. By early 1536, they were locked in a political death match. Only one could survive. Did Cromwell see an opportunity to remove his rival and please the king at the same time? He was the mastermind behind the investigation into an ET. Was he who gathered the evidence, tortured witnesses, and built the case that would bring her down? For Cromwell, removing Anne wasn't just about politics. It was about survival. But Cromwell wasn't acting alone. He had powerful allies who despised Anne for their own reasons. Let's look at the old aristocratic families, like the Howards. Ironically, Anne's own relatives. The Duke of Norfolk, Anne's uncle, was a staunch conservative who hated the religious reforms she championed. He saw her as a dangerous upstart who had poisoned the king's mind against the old ways. He eagerly participated in her trial and even presided over it, showing no mercy to his own niece. Then there were the supporters of Catherine of Aragon and Princess Mary, who had been waiting for years to see Anne fall. People like Eustace Chapais, the imperial ambassador, fed a constant stream of anti-Anne propaganda back to the courts of Europe and likely whispered poison in the ears of English nobles. They all had a motive: to restore the old order and see a queen on the throne who they could control. For them, Anne's death was a necessary evil to correct a terrible mistake. Let's not forget our third suspect, Jane Seymour and her family. The Seymours were an ambitious family on the rise, and they played their cards perfectly. While Anne was fiery and argumentative, Jane presented herself as the complete opposite: meek, gentle, and submissive. She was everything Henry now thought he wanted in a wife. Her brothers, Edward and Thomas Seymour, were ambitious men who encouraged the king's affections for their sister. They positioned Jane as the perfect replacement for the troublesome Anne. While Jane might not have been actively plotting murder, she and her family strategically placed themselves to benefit from Anne's downfall. They offered Henry the promise of what Anne couldn't deliver: a peaceful life and, hopefully, a son. Their quiet ambition provided the final piece of the puzzle. giving Henry a clear path to a new marriage. But of course, we must confront the man at the center of it all, King Henry VIII himself. Was he a pawn in Cromwell's game, or was he the puppet master? The evidence suggests Henry was far from a passive victim. He was desperate to remarry and secure his dynasty. When he turned against Anne, he did so with a chilling finality. It was Henry who authorized the investigation. It was Henry who signed the death warrant. He could have chosen a more merciful path, like annulment and exile, as he had with Catherine of Aragon. Instead, he chose the executioner's sword. Why? Perhaps his ego was so bruised by Anne's arguments and her failure to produce a son that he needed to utterly destroy her. He needed to prove to the world, and to himself, that she was the sinner and he was the righteous, wronged king. He may have even convinced himself the outlandish charges were true. The speed and brutality of Anne's fall suggest a king who was not just complicit, but the driving force behind the entire affair. So, who killed Anne Boleyn? The truth is, there was no single killer. It was a perfect storm, a convergence of powerful interests, all pointing toward one outcome. Thomas Cromwell was the architect of the plot, drafting the legal framework that would condemn her. The conservative nobility and Catherine's supporters formed a willing chorus, amplifying the accusations and ensuring there would be no support for the Queen. The Seymour family provided the attractive alternative that made removing her not just possible, but desirable. But ultimately, the trigger was pulled by King Henry VIII. He was the judge, jury, and executioner. He gave the order because Anne had ceased to be useful to him. Her intelligence and spirit, the very qualities he once adored, had become a threat. She was a queen who had forgotten her place, and for that, in the brutal world of the Tudor court, she had to be eliminated. Anne Boleyn wasn't just executed. She was erased by a conspiracy of convenience, led by a king who would let nothing, and no one, stand in the way of his will. What do you think? Was Cromwell the true villain, or was Henry the ultimate monster? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into Tudor history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from the past. See you next time. The morning of May 19, 1536, a thick fog hangs over London, delaying the inevitable. Inside the Tower of London, a queen prepares for her final public appearance. But this isn't a royal procession. It's a walk to the executioner's block. This is the story of Anne Boleyn's last day on earth. What really happened in those final fateful hours? What was going through her mind? And how did a queen, once the most powerful woman in England, meet such a brutal end? Join us as we peel back the layers of history and uncover the truth behind Anne Boleyn's final moments. To understand her end, we have to understand her beginning. Anne Boleyn wasn't just another courtier. She was brilliant, witty, and fiercely ambitious. She captured the heart of King Henry VIII, a man obsessed with securing a male heir. For Anne, he broke with the Catholic Church, divorced his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and changed the course of English history forever. She promised him a son, the ultimate prize. In 1533, she was crowned Queen of England, pregnant and seemingly at the pinnacle of power. But the child she bore was not the promised son. It was a daughter, Elizabeth. Though a disappointment to Henry, the birth of a healthy daughter wasn't a total disaster. But Anne's subsequent pregnancies ended in miscarriages. The pressure mounted. Henry's eye, once so fixed on Anne, began to wander. The court was a viper's nest of political intrigue, with factions loyal to the old queen, Catherine, and those who saw Anne as a dangerous reformer. Her sharp tongue and bold opinions, once so charming to the king, now made her powerful enemies. Her greatest enemy, it turned out, was the man who had raised her to the throne, Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister. Cromwell, a master political strategist, saw that Anne's influence was waning. With Henry now infatuated with Jane Seymour, Cromwell saw his chance. He needed to remove Anne, and he needed to do it quickly and decisively. The charge, treason, but not just any treason. The accusations were shocking. Adultery with 5 men, including her own brother, George Boleyn. The charges were almost certainly fabricated, a web of coerced confessions and flimsy evidence designed for one purpose: to convince the king and the country that Anne was not just an unfaithful wife, but a traitor who had bewitched the king and plotted his death. Her trial was a sham. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Found guilty on May 15th, she was sentenced to be burned or beheaded at the king's pleasure. Her supposed lovers had already been executed 2 days prior. Henry, in a final, twisted act of mercy, spared her the pyre. He even granted her last request, to be executed not by the common axe, but by a skilled swordsman from France. An axe could take several messy swings. A sword promised a swift, clean end. It was the only dignity the king would afford her. So we return to that foggy morning, May 19th. The execution, originally scheduled for 9 a.m., was delayed. Was it the fog, or was the swordsman from Calais late? Inside her apartments in the tower, Anne spent her final hours in prayer with her almoner. Eyewitness accounts say she was calm, almost cheerful. She reportedly joked with the constable of the tower, William Kingston, about her impending death. Hearing he was told she would not suffer, she laughed and said, "I have a little neck," putting her hands around it. Was this bravery, hysteria, or the profound peace of someone who had made her peace with God? Finally, around noon, the fog lifted. It was time. Anne walked from the Queen's apartments to the scaffold erected on Tower Green, a space reserved for private executions of the nobility. She wasn't led like a common criminal. She walked with composure, accompanied by her ladies. She wore a dark grey or black damask gown, an ermine mantle, and a stylish English gable hood. She was a queen to the very end. The crowd was small, a select group of about 1,000 officials and dignitaries summoned to witness the fall of a queen. On the scaffold she addressed the crowd. Her speech was a masterpiece of diplomacy. In an age where a condemned person's last words could have major political consequences, Anne was careful. She didn't protest her innocence or curse the king. To do so would have endangered her daughter, Elizabeth. Instead, she played the part of the dutiful subject. She praised King Henry, calling him a gentle and sovereign lord. She asked the crowd to pray for him and urged them not to meddle in state affairs. She concluded by commending her soul to Jesus Christ. It was a final, brilliant act of self-preservation for her legacy and her child. After her speech, she removed her mantle and headdress. Her ladies, weeping, helped her tie a blindfold over her eyes. She knelt down upright, in the French style of execution. The executioner of Calais, a man renowned for his skill, reportedly distracted her. According to some accounts, he called out, "Bring me the sword," and as Anne looked around for it, he struck from the other side. It was over in a single, silent stroke. The Queen of England was dead. A cannon shot rang out from the tower, a signal to the king, who was waiting miles away, that the deed was done. He was now free to marry Jane Seymour. Anne Boleyn's body was placed in an old arrow chest and buried in an unmarked grave in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower walls. She was a queen for only 1,000 days, but her legacy is immeasurable. Her fall was as dramatic as her rise. She was a woman who dared to challenge the established order, a catalyst for the English Reformation, and the mother of one of England's greatest monarchs, Queen Elizabeth I. In the end, it was Anne's daughter who would fulfill the promise of a glorious reign, securing the Tudor dynasty in a way no son ever could. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the brutal politics and personal ambitions that shaped the Tudor court. A world where love could turn to hate overnight, and the favor of a king was the difference between a crown and a sword. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history's most compelling moments. Let us know in the comments what you think about Anne Boleyn's final hours. We'll see you in the next video.